Now let's talk about the G7 members, the leaders of the participating nations. 6 out of the 7 face domestic hurdles. Tough elections on the horizon, dwindling support and the possibility of an ouster. 6 of the G7 leaders face this. The only exception is the host, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Her stock is on the rise, while the other leaders are facing a rout. First, let's look at the struggling politicians. 3 of them are in immediate danger. US President Joe Biden, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and French President Emmanuel Macron. Biden faces an election in the month of November this year, and he's barely hanging on. Recent polls showed that he's neck and neck with his rival Donald Trump, even though Trump is now a convicted felon. That shows that the US public does not rate Biden very highly, and he may just get the sack in a few months from now. Things look even worse for Rishi Sunak. The British Prime Minister is trailing by a massive margin. His party is staring at a rout in the election next month. Their fate should be sealed in about 3 weeks from now. So it's likely that this G7 summit will be Rishi Sunak's last. Then there's Emmanuel Macron, the French president, who's taken a risky gamble. He called for snap parliamentary elections after his party got a drubbing in the recent European Union parliamentary elections. The EU results showed that Macron's party has lost public confidence, and he wants to turn that around immediately. If his ploy works, if his party manages to win the election, his position will be secure. However, if they lose, Macron will become a lame duck president. The opposition will take over the French parliament. They will block every move of the president. So Macron will be almost powerless till he leaves office in 2027. So this is how Biden, Sunak and Macron are placed. Then we come to the other 3 leaders who are struggling. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Scholz is in the same boat as Macron. His party did very badly in the recent EU elections. They came 3rd in Germany. So like Macron, Scholz seems to have lost popular support. But unlike Macron, Scholz is not trying to salvage his legitimacy. So far, he has resisted calls for a snap election. It seems that he wants to ride out the storm instead of facing it head on. But this strategy may not help his popularity, and whatever he does, Germany will still go to polls next year at the latest. So if not now, Olaf Scholz may be out of the door in a year's time. Then there's Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. His country goes to polls next year as well, and he currently has a record low approval rating, the lowest in history for a leader of his party. Opinion polls suggest that Trudeau won't survive the next election. Then there's Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. His cabinet has hit its lowest approval since he took charge. They've been rocked by one scandal after another. His party has been linked to a controversial church. The alleged ties led to the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. 4 of Kishida's cabinet ministers had to quit last December over a fundraising scandal. This prompted a new funding law last week in a bid to control damage. But Kishida's popularity continues to sink, and he may not be able to survive the next general election that is slated for 2025 in Japan. So to recap, Biden, Sunak and Macron could lose power this year. Scholz, Trudeau and Kishida could be out next year, which means 6 out of the G7 government, 7 leaders, are in a weak position, 6 out of 7. The only exception, like I said, is the host, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. She emerged as a big winner of the recent EU election. Her party more than doubled their seat tally. It makes her a force to be reckoned with in Europe and in the G7, and Meloni knows this.
It is a message that comes to us from Italians. Go ahead, go ahead. I take it as someone's message to say go ahead and do it, if possible with greater determination. A sign that I understand, a sign that I am ready to seize. And I'm proud that we are heading to the G7 and to Europe with the strongest government of all.
She said, the strongest government of all. Giorgia Meloni knows that she's firmly in the driver's seat. She's the only G7 leader who seems to have public support. In fact, support for her has increased since she came to power. So as the others struggle with their legitimacy, Meloni could be the one taking the lead. One of the key discussions this week will involve the EU's top job, the post of European Commission President. The current President, Ursula von der Leyen, will be at the G7 summit. She will sit down with Scholz, Macron and Meloni to try and formalize an EU parliamentary coalition. Now, von der Leyen needs support from at least two of these three leaders, and Meloni is in the strongest position to negotiate a deal here. If she extends her support to Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission would have to accommodate Meloni. And this would cement her place as a global leader. And given how her peers are struggling, no one seems to be better suited to take on a bigger role at the global stage. Fan of Italy's famous cuisine? Well, we are serving it with a side of diplomacy. As the G7 leaders gather in southern Italy, Vantage is taking you to the heart of the action. What's the agenda? Who is invited? And how is Italy preparing for it? Catch the special edition of Vantage throughout this week, only on Firstpost. Fan of Italy's famous cuisine? Well, we are serving it with a side of diplomacy. As G7 leaders gather in southern Italy, Vantage is taking you to the heart of the action. What's the agenda? Who is invited? And how is Italy preparing for it? Catch the special edition of Vantage throughout this week, only on Firstpost.